Hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Jingle, jingle, jingle. Gotta have it. The jingle gnome is always there.
Oh. So this book was Lottie's pick, because Lottie is a big Brandon Sanderson fan.
If you've listened to the podcast, ever, you will be aware of this fact.
You'll be aware of this fact.
Lottie, do you want to give us a terrible summary of this book?
Yes. I'll give a terrible summary and then we can do our terrible summaries and then we can do an actual summary. So I've said 2 sisters, 1 arranged marriage, everyone's favourite talking sword and a paint box of colour. And also just brackets, how on earth did I not pick up the references to this book in Way of Kings? I do not know, but it was such a long break. I was rereading this, I was it's quite obvious.
The intertextuality, baby. Well, I'm glad you came up with a terrible summary, because the best I could come up with was, wait, it's everybody we've ever met in this book with their own unique steel chair.
Oh my god, the denouement of this book goes on for 5 years and everybody has a twist. And I enjoyed it, but my brain was also a massive pile of spaghetti by the end.
I mean, I definitely agree. I'll give a sort of, I say a proper summary,
Yes.
So if you are not aware of Brandon Sanderson's work, he has a series of books called Cosmere. So Cosmere is the universe where these books are set. I say universe, it's probably more it is more a solar system. So
yeah, it's kind of it's a reality, right? It's a sort of a plane.
Yeah, so there's literally planets. There's a number of different planets in the solar system. They all orbit the same sun. And each planet is called, or each planet with a quote shard on it is called a shard world. So a shard is referencing also, I think I mentioned this when we were talking about the Emperor's Soul. There was this sort of, I say deity, sort of higher being called Andolazium. I will pronounce it correctly this time.
Fantasy, no correct pronunciations. It's fine. Yeah. There is no god here.
And at some point, I think before any of these books were written in sort of, I guess, the sort of history of this universe.
The before times. Before
time began, Andolazium broke into 16 shards. And so as a result, each shard has I guess I said personality type. It's
one of the Myers-Briggs personality types. There's 16 of them.
Yeah, basically. So I'm going to try and not spoiler Mistborn, because I know there's a few people who listen to the podcast who are currently reading Mistborn. So I'm going to keep it more to maybe comparing to Way of Kings and also The Emperor's Soul, because we have read that. In Way of Kings, you have 2 shards. That's on a different planet called Roshar. In this world for Warbreaker, the planet is called Nathlis and its shard is called Endowment. So every shard has a sort of driving force. An endowment is to endow things on people. That is her entire purpose. And when the shards get to these worlds, they are taken upon by somebody on that planet. So there is sort of a shard bearer. And this is a human who sort of ascends this godhood-like status. So the shard's vessel in this case is Egdli. That's not mentioned in the book. That's just me furiously writing things down from the wiki yesterday.
That name does come up, though, I think, in the book.
Yes,
as
it does.
Sort of an oath or something?
So it is, and it's also the name of the tears of the tears of Egli, which is the flower that is found. And
That's
there is a reason that the flowers are so colourful. If you are know a little bit about Sanderson's Cosmere, the reason that those plants are there is because they're close to a perpendicularity. So it's this point where the physical realm, the cognitive realm, and the spiritual realm all meet at this point, this perpendicularity. And so as a result, a lot of magic there, cool plants. Okay, I think that's sort of the background. And I think this is something I really want to talk about, because on reading this book, I think this book has probably got the most complicated magic system out of all the books I've read in Sanderson's
Which,
Cosmere.
it's such a relief to hear you say, because I was just sitting there going, am I stupid?
No,
I'm really stupid.
It's
what
really
is
not
happening?
I got the basics of it, and how people can make the awakening stuff. I kind of got, but I remembered you talking about the sort of internal pulling and internal pushing and all of the stuff that we talked about with Mistborn, and I could not figure out how that translated here, and if it was meant to be another embodiment of that same system.
Yeah, it's very similar. I think it's more similar to the forging in the Emperor's Soul than it is to Mistborn.
Yeah, the whole...
Because you're giving qualities to other things.
Yeah. So I made a note, because I think in Mistborn, I think what Mistborn sets up really well is the concept of different magic systems based off the same sort of shard world. So in Mistborn, we had the Alomacy for the Mistborn, we had the Fumacy for people like Zazed. And so it was a similar kind of magic, but different. The Fumacy, for example, for Zazed, he was storing stuff in his metal mines. And that act of storing is what in Sanderson's sort of universe is called investiture. So you're investing something. So Zazed's metal mines were invested with history or memories and things like this.
And when you awaken something, you're investing life force in it.
It's sort of breath.
Yeah. And then the second thing was in Elantris, so I guess also Elantris, the book, that sets up really well of the concepts of shards dying and also perpendicularities, which is sort of mentioned offhand in the background.
Yeah.
But in the Emperor's Soul, I think what that sets up really well, and I think it's much better done in Emperor's Soul compared to this book, is the concept of the intent behind the thoughts. So two things happened in Emperor.
It gets mentioned here that what's going through your head matters as well as what you're saying.
Yeah, and also kind of what the object wants. So in the Emperor's Soul, when she was forging things...
Oh, yeah, they have to look... The closer they look to the original thing, or the more they want to be the original thing, the closer you can...
If the thing is shaped more like a person, it will be easier to awaken. If the thing wants to be a stained glass window, it will be easier to turn it into a stained glass window.
Yeah.
So
that kind of concept, I think, was really well done in the Emperor's Soul. I think this touches on it, but in my opinion, this magic system, this is a standalone novel, and its purpose, in my opinion, is also to set up, I think, a bit in the Stormlight Archive, which is his magnum opus. He wrote that one first, but couldn't publish it because it's 1,000 pages, and the publishers were like, But what is the interesting point about this book is he has on his website all of the edited versions. So as it was going through the edited process, he's put it all online. You can download it.
Yeah.
And so if you're basically his point
cool
was if you're an aspiring writer, you can go and see the changes to the story to the final product.
Yeah.
Which I think
now,
is
that's really
cool.
interesting to me, because one of the things I felt when I was, particularly in the first 20% of this book, was that it could really have used some heavier editing.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So I'd actually be really interested to go and read what there was.
It's so funny to me as well, because I'm comparing this to Terry Pratchett's thing of we put all of the earlier drafts on a hard drive and then we run them over with a steamroller so nobody can ever see.
Yeah, it's the opposite. And what was interesting in this book is the concept of the breath. So in this book, the breath is innate investiture that you're born with. So in this world, you have innate based invested magic. Can't do much with it, but it's there. And of these two worlds, you've got the Idrians have brought this idea of that your breath is your soul, whereas in the Hallandren world, it's kind of more as it's a part of you, but you can't you can get rid of it.
It's a bit like a spare kidney, you know?
Yeah, it is effectively.
You might sell it if you fall on hard times.
Exactly. So it's kind of less of selling. It's not attached to your soul. So I thought that was quite an interesting concept. But yeah, the breath is investiture. And so the magic system in this world, as a result, is awakening. So you can, quote, awaken an item because you can have your breath. And if you've collected some more, you can put it in a cloak that has hand-like things, and it can then act like a hand. That's probably the best way to describe it. And in all honesty, I haven't read this book in about 5 years, and I think it's finally on this one. I'm like, oh, I get it now. I get it. And I'm kind of like, when I first read this, a number of the key characters I remember. So you've got Siri and Vivenna, the two sisters. They come from Idris. And then in Hallandren, you've got these people who are, quote, gods. And
which, can I just say, they were my favourites of all of that. I don't give a shit about anybody else in this book.
They're
like, Lightsong is it for me.
And dramatic, and like Lightsong is just like so he's one of these returned gods.
He's my favourite useless idiot in the whole world. I adore him.
My favourite himbo who just becomes convinced that he's like Sherlock Holmes, and I just love it.
It honestly was the best, and I completely agree with you, Eli, that I think the first 20% of this book could be reduced because
it's very much like you open it and he just basically like. I think his world building is really, really interesting, but the way that he delivers it sometimes is very heavy-handed. It's very much like, you are reading a fantasy novel, TM, and let me tell you all of my fantasy. Like, there's, like, the narrative voice was kind of unclear if it was supposed to be expository or if it was supposed to be telling you like, very much there were times when characters would say things to each other that they would never actually say, but it was for us, it was for the benefit of the reader, and that kind of took me out of the immersion.
Yeah. It's really funny that you say this because, like, I don't disagree, but I actually found I had it the other way round. Like, I felt like everything he needed to set up everything was in the first 20%, and in the middle, like 70% of the book, I was like, why is this here? I'm lost. This is dragging on a lot.
There was one exchange that kind of exemplified it for me, which was, so Lightsong is this god who has, he basically, what happens is you die, and then sometimes people come back if they died in like really particularly like brave or a way that exemplified a certain quality. And I want to ask Lottie later about like why that happens, if it's made clear why that happens.
Yeah, I can explain that.
Awesome. But anyway, and so once they've come back, they're like super tall, super good looking, very physically strong, etc. They don't need to work out to be ripped all the time, and they can't get drunk. And this is just common knowledge within the world.
Which doesn't stop Lightsong for trying, which is extremely funny to me.
We love him for that.
They all have these like one particular priest that's like their right-hand person. And so Lightsong's right-hand person is this priest called Larimar. And
which I keep thinking about fantasy pronunciation. I cannot see the double L without going.
I know. I'm just like, is it meant to be Welsh?
Yeah, I'm just like
Clarimar at the start.
Clarimar, is that you? It's like no, don't do that.
Anyway, and there's this one exchange where like Larimar reminds Lightsong that he can't get drunk, and it's like you would never say those words. You would never actually say that out loud to somebody who already knew it, and it felt a little bit forced.
I don't know. For me, that felt like a very in character like. For Larimar and Lightsong's relationship, where Lightsong is just clowning constantly, and Larimar's like, okay, I know you know this, but like, hey, just in case like me saying this will actually get it through your thick skull, you can't get drunk. Like, to me, it felt very much like this is the banter that we've always had kind of thing, rather than like, oh, gods can't get drunk. It just read to me like Larimar being like, oh, for like just head palm, like I'm used to this bullshit. Like,
whereas there were the other instances earlier in the book in Idris, which I thought felt kind of similar, and so therefore I saw that as another part in that pattern as opposed to a relationship moment for them. Yeah. But now that you've said it, that does make a lot of sense.
I think one of the things is so Siri and Vivenna. So Vivenna is set up as a daughter who's going to go and marry the God King to basically have this peace pact, and the dad who is a bit of a dick.
Parent TM, like this is the biggest piece of garbage ever.
Yeah,
basically, parenting 101 is kind of like, I don't want to send my favorite child. I'm going to send the other one, and the other one being Siri, who I love.
Basically, a wild child.
She's the feral goblin child,
Yeah, and Vivenna has been brought up her whole life to be say, you're going to marry this God King, you're going to have all the politics and all of that.
Yeah, and you're gonna basically, your marriage is going to prevent this other kingdom from annihilating us, is kind of the...
And Siri gets sent instead. And Siri is very, very, not only headstrong, but she never had those lessons. So when she goes to the Hallandren and the court of the gods, she has no idea what she's stepping herself in for, but she also doesn't have, in my head, I think at the start, Vivenna is very seeing things in black and white, yes or no. And I think Siri is much more open to change. She's like, oh, I'll try the dress. Oh, I'll try the food. Oh, I'll try this. Whereas Vivenna's been so sheltered. She's kind of And I think one, it's kind of like she sort of sees this, yes, and she clearly opens up by the end, but it's a very different way of viewing the world between the two sisters.
I think Vivenna is also headstrong in her own way. Like, she's so convinced that she's right.
Yes.
Like, she's been brought up in this very kind of almost Puritan doctrine of like, you can't have nice things. Like, you can't make yourself look beautiful. You can't use too much color, because the whole, like, one thing I don't think we've actually really talked about is the whole magic system is also based on color. And you can't, because it's ostentatious, and God gave you one breath, and that's what you're meant to have. And
also, like, you have to there have to be colorful things for you to do magic. Like, you draw color out of stuff to do magic.
Yeah. And then it's like these two kingdoms are like complete polar opposites, and it's kind of interesting because they used to be one kingdom and then they split, and they've kind of grown apart because of each other. So you can see how Idris would become more Puritan and more drab and more austere, and Hallandren will become more ostentatious and garish and brightly coloured.
Well, it's making a virtue out of necessity, isn't it? Because they weren't exactly the losers, but they are in the most precarious position. Yes. They're in the most reduced state.
Yeah.
Their royal family technically has a better legitimate claim to rule Hallandren, I think, than the God Kings, or there's something going on there.
But they can't press it because they'll get obliterated.
Yeah, but like they control like a very important like economic, is it like a pass that they control the trade routes or something?
Yeah, they control trade routes.
But like it's very much like we don't have anything, so we're gonna lean into that as much as possible. And
it's basically, we have nothing, we'll lean into it as the foundation of our society.
I did quite like the whole people, like the palace is just like this 1-story building and anyone can walk in and like...
Yeah.
I vibed with that.
That appealed to my leftist soul.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that struck me, like I made a note of when Siri first goes to Hallandren and she sees all this colour and she's like, oh my god, it's amazing. Then she goes inside the palace of the gods and then they're like, yeah, you can't leave here. And she's like, but I want to see all the things. And then, whereas when Vivenna goes, she's, colour, don't like it.
Everybody's showing their tits.
Well, no, the thing is she does like it and then she feels gross about it.
Yeah, so she's kind of like, it's kind of like, I can't enjoy it.
And there is one thing about which I think they are right in Idris, which is that, so part of what goes on in Hallandren is that people have to sell their breath. Like, if you're poor, something that is almost like can be expected of you is that you'll sell maybe even your child's breath, because if the longer they go without it, the less they'll know that they're missing, because the world becomes dimmer and less vibrant once you don't have it anymore. And there's various reasons why you might do this. There's various things that breaths are used for, aside from just the magic. And like, I don't know how I think that's pretty icky as well. It kind of reminds me of Omelas, where it's like, kind of powered by a forsaken child. Like, for everybody who's got like 100 breaths walking around and being able to do magic, there's 100 people who don't have breaths.
Yeah, and I definitely think that was a point when I first read this book, when I was thinking about this magic system, is just that, in Hallandren, you can give up a breath. They have to, the gods need a breath a week in order to sustain their life.
Why is that? Can we talk about the mechanics of the returned gods now?
Yes.
Like, why do they come back and why do they need breaths?
So when someone dies, or at least in this case, someone dies doing something heroic or sort of, important.
Yeah, we actually only find out what Lightsong did. We don't find out what the rest of them did. So it's kind of like, we know that, like, Lightsong is often very skeptical about, like, what he or anyone else could possibly have done to earn this. And nobody else seems that bothered.
Well, I have a question, which is, we know what Lightsong did because somebody who was there at the time is part of the story still, apart from him.
Yeah.
How, I don't know if it is widely known what the gods died of.
Well, they don't remember and they're not allowed to be told, right?
Yeah. So it's sort of part of the religion is tying that down, that sort of loophole down. But, okay, spoiler, Lightsong died because he saved his niece. And when he died, he had this disembodied voice talking to him saying, you need to go back and continue, you've done something that is worthy of you going back. And what happens is Endowment, the shard, splinters a little piece of herself and gives that to that person who's died. So that's how they get to come back.
And that's why they have such big single breaths. Like, that's a massive, massive single bit of investiture.
Yeah. So she's basically give them a little bit of investiture to say, you need to go back. And it's the only way she can influence the world. It's kind of another aspect where I think it's done a bit better, or I say a bit better, in Way of Kings, there is a lot more time to explain that. Because the shards of the world...
And is that on the same world?
Yeah, so Endowment in this world can't directly influence and, like, prod people. But she can influence them through other means, and that's how they all get the dreams. So the dreams are her way of saying, this is what's going to happen. I need to forewarn you of this. So Lights On, close to his death, realised all of his dreams were aspects of either just before he died. So she's trying to say, like, you need to continue, like, helping people because that's why I've sent you back. But also that he has to give up his breath to save the God King. That's how...
Yeah. Well, specifically to heal him.
Yeah. And it's expanded a little bit more in Mistborn 2 and 3. I won't explain how, because like I say, no people reading the books. But I think in this one, there's quite a lot of things going on with the magic system that aren't explained fully. And which sort of frustrates me a bit.
It muddies the waters when you're trying to understand what, like, for example, the thing I said earlier where I'm like, is this exposition or is this a character moment? Like, if you don't know what you're supposed to understand about the magic system, then it's hard to tell what the characters necessarily mean or,
Which is it's such a striking contrast to Emperor's Soul when really it all gets drawn so sharply and so efficiently that you know from the get-go pretty much exactly what's involved, and it's very self-contained, which is something I really appreciate in something like this.
You can definitely tell that Emperor's Soul was written a lot later. Like, this is I think it was after he had Lantris, the first 3 Mistborns, and this one in publishing order, but I have a feeling this one must have been one of the first books he ever wrote because of the links to Way of Kings, which is he definitely started writing it earlier on. And I think you're still trying to find those hints, like me rereading it now, and I'm like, I don't need to understand it. The first time I read it, I didn't understand half of it. I'm like, yay, talking sword, whoopie-doo.
We need to talk about the talking sword.
I would love to talk about Nightblood. It's definitely the most complicated magic system. The Return come back and they have this splinter of endowment, and so that's why they have their innate breath.
Yeah.
And how the religion's controlled is that they say that they need 1 breath a week to survive.
Do they, though?
Incorrect. They need a breath a week to survive, but they can have more. So if they had 10 breaths, they would survive for 10 weeks. If they have 1,000 breaths, they survive for 1,000 weeks.
But they would still need to get those from somebody, right? Or 10 somebodies.
But they don't need to be given just 1 a week. They could have like a top up of more.
Oh yeah, because there's like a hoarding. There's a whole hoarding thing. Because that's why the God King's so powerful, right? Because he's been hoarding for like many, many years.
His and his family have basically hoarded all these breaths, passed it down to the next God King, and so it's just accumulated. And that's why, okay, again, massive spoiler, that's why Vashir, as it turns out at the end, has survived for hundreds of years, because he had this huge stash of breaths. And so he just uses all those other ones, not the innate one. And so that's why he can live for so long.
Right. So the God Kings are always babies that are returned. So they're basically always stillborn children who returned for whatever reason. Because Endowment decided that this one was going to be the next one.
Yeah. So
therefore, as returned people, they have this big off breath that Endowment has given them as part of like a little bit of the shard. Do all of those, so there have been like 5 God Kings or something, there's not been that many. But do each of those go into the massive pile that keeps getting passed down?
I don't think so. So I think it's like all the quote top-up ones.
Of course, because actually they don't kill off the God Kings every time, do they? They go away and they live somewhere else, quietly.
No. So like the first returned, Vo, that guy only lived for a week. But his wife, who was pregnant, tootled off and tootled off to Idris, and that is why Siri and Vivenna and anyone who is of royal blood can change their hair colour, because the returned can change their form. It's something that I feel should have maybe been brought a bit earlier in the book, because I feel the last third, it's like both an exposition dump and also wrapping up a lot of threads.
A lot of threads.
And I definitely felt that when I first read it, I was like, oh, could we have had that earlier? Because it turns out Vashir, as a returned, can change his form, and all the other God Kings could as well.
I kind of I liked the reveal that Vashir's been wandering around looking like a gremlin this whole time on purpose. That made me very happy.
Also the fact that, like, because he was all these, like, major characters during the Many War, that everyone's using Kalad's phantoms as a swear word to him, and he is Kalad.
That's quite funny. That is pretty funny.
It made me chuckle.
Well, you know what else I love? Is that so he was also Peacegiver, and he was the one who basically had this massive stash of souls, gave them to the God Kings of Hallandren and said, look, you got to keep these safe. Don't let them be used, but, like, you might need them someday. And then that comes back, like, as in the using of those souls is the God King gives them back to Peacegiver so that he can use them to reanimate the army to stop Hallandren from going to declare war on Idris. Like, it's this whole kind of circular thing which actually comes back on itself, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. I was going to say, actually, I also felt that the shape-shifting thing actually was done pretty well, because I felt like that was one of the... So when I was saying earlier that I really felt that, like, everything you needed for the finale was set up in the first 20%, and I didn't really get what the middle chunk of the book was for.
Yeah.
Part of why that was because I felt like there was this really long period where none of the things that you needed for the twist were like, or the many twists were mentioned. So I'd kind of forgotten about them. I didn't feel like there was a thread so much as there was a jump back a huge amount. But this one, I feel like, was maintained pretty well, because Lightsong is constantly musing about, like, why are we all so attractive? Why is it all specifically this way attractive and not another way attractive? How does that work? Why don't we have to work out for X way? Why don't we have to maintain any of this? What's going on?
Like, Lightsong is doing all of the poking at the world building that I want to do in universe, and I found that very satisfying.
Yeah. And I think that the payoff for that is that, like, they're controlling it. Like, it's a shape-shifting thing, and because that's what they think gods look like, that's what they look like.
It's like the residual self-image in the Matrix.
Basically,
So for me, that didn't feel like it came out of nowhere. Because, like, it had been, I felt like that one at least was maintained across the book in a way that I felt like some of them, like, weren't so much.
I kind of feel, I can't decide, and I would love to talk about Nightblood, but I can't decide if this would have been better, either as 2 books, or, like, you took some of the side plots out and trimmed it down a bit, because I do agree that, like, when I read a lot of Brandon Sanderson, one of the reasons I love his books is you're reading, and then you're like, oh, plot twist. Oh, wait, I thought this. Oh, no, it's not that. Oh, it's this. And it's sort of, you always get to the end of the book, and it's always a bit of a roller coaster. And that's what I really love about reading them. This book felt like it was like a really, really, really slow climb to the top. And then it was like, boom! And I love it. It's great.
Whereas I felt the roller coaster went on for so long that I was a little bit queasy by the end and had kind of lost track of which way was up.
Yeah. It's kind of, it's sort of, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. I mean, I still love this book. It's a great comfort read, but yeah.
I mean, one of the things that came up when because Eli and I were talking about it with our other housemates, and one of the things that kept coming up was that it felt a bit like Everything Wrong with Sherlock video thing of Stephen Moffat needs limits. Stephen Moffat is a good writer if you make him stick to 45 minutes and you don't give him, like, full season control. And, like, the contrast between this and Emperor's Soul really made me think, if you make Brandon Sanderson write a novella, the thing is, we know he can do it.
It'll be the tightest ever.
Right? We know he can do that kind of dense world build, subtle, nuanced world building in a really tiny space of time. And I don't have any problem with, like, any of the specific world building, or like the way it's built up, or the bits that go into all the moving parts of the system. The problem I have is that there's so much other material that I felt like I lost all of that. I lost track of all of the things I was supposed to be juggling in order to keep track of the twists at the end.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I definitely felt when rereading this, it felt a lot like Way of Kings and less like Mistborn. Like, if, say, Mistborn is to Emperor's Soul, as this is to Way of Kings, and Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive is 1,000 pages of chunk of a book. It is a chunky book. And it felt like either it was a much longer book that the publishers were like, please God, no, make it shorter. But because it had that sense of scope and scale, when you trim it down, not all of those things are carried forward. Whereas with Mistborn, I feel it was more self-contained, and an Emperor's Soul, like you said, with the novellas, and there are other novellas that he's written, that it's a really good self-contained, and it does show, I think, that the Emperor's Soul was written much more recently. I think he's crafted the storytelling.
It feels more mature,
Yeah, it feels much more mature with the writing.
I was going to say, the thing I think about Mistborn, at least the first one, because obviously I haven't read the other two, I think it really benefited from sticking to that, not quite the heist structure, but the fact that the characters had a plan to do a thing, and they sat down and they wrote it down on a fantasy whiteboard at the beginning, and it had beats, and then they were stuck to that.
Yes.
Like, obviously, you know, the situation changed and they had to adapt, and that was another bit of construction that I thought was really good. But I think almost like having to think about it like a heist / self-contained revolution type thing meant that he had that kind of belt and braces that meant that he couldn't get lost, you know? You didn't lose, he didn't disappear up his own world building in quite the same.
Well, no, it is true, because I think it's got a similar, with Elantris, which was the first one he published, that again, I struggled to connect to the magic system as much as I did when I first read Mistborn. I was like, I understand what's going on, I understand the heist, and I understand what the magic is, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take away my joy for these books, but it's definitely, like, if I'm going to go and reread something, I'll go reread Way of Kings. I've reread Way of Kings, like, honestly, like, once a year. I love that book. Whereas Elantris, I'm not going to reread regularly, for example.
I mean, it was kind of interesting to me, a weird sort of perspective thing, is that I could genuinely tell that if I had read this for the first time aged 11 or 12, I would be having the exact same experience as you. You know, where I can kind of see its flaws, but I could tell this would be one of the things that, like, 11-year-old Em would have eaten this up.
It would have lived rent-free in my head for forever.
And I would have that, like, really strong nostalgic connection to it now, where I would be like, I would just reread this whenever I've got a gap in my schedule, and I feel like, you know, I could see how in that context as well, it being so long and having so much in it is actually a benefit, because with that kind of read, what you want is to be immersed in that comforting world for as long as possible. So it becomes a benefit in that situation in a way that I think if you're coming to it fresh, it's like, I don't know what this is here for.
It's one of the reasons that I haven't gone back and reread the Piratica books.
Oh, interesting.
Well, I worry that on a reread, I'll be like, oh, you know, this kind of falls flat, or I have the same issues with it, or whatever. Whereas as a, like, I don't know. But I'm hoping that I will have the same, like, nostalgia.
I see what they're shorter, though. They are a lot shorter.
I think, because when I was thinking, okay, when I was rereading this book, it's been about probably at least 5 years since I last read this book. And what I remembered from it was Vivenna, Nightblood, Vashir. I sort of forgot about what Siri did, to be honest.
I mean, to be fair,
I actually really like Siri.
And I remember Lightson. I know, I love her as a character, but there are people in these books who turn up elsewhere in the Cosmere.
Well, I spotted Hoyd. I did have a bastard spotted moment there.
And what I loved was in The Way of Kings, Hoyd also does a storytelling. He is a storyteller in that world as well. And he does the same kind of magic, and that makes me really happy. He cherry picks each of them. So I think it's not a spoiler, but if you notice it, you'll notice it, is in Way of Kings, he definitely does Alomacy.
Oh, that's really interesting.
He definitely does Awakening, and he also does his Sand one, which is from Jodlan, which is his world.
That's very cool.
But yeah, I do love, and so that's what I think when I was rereading this, I was like, I just want to see Vivenna and Nightblood again, because they're my faves.
Yeah, I was going to say, did we want to talk about, I mean, I think this, talking about character and talking about twists really fits together very nicely in this book, because I feel like every single character that we meet, either we don't know who they are, or they're not who we think they are, or they're not who they think they are. And I felt like that was a really interesting through line in the... So I wanted to talk about, Vivenna's character arc and Ciri's and the mercenaries and Vasha, the Vasha. I love that. I'm so here for that.
Yeah.
Like, what was your guys', opinion on the characters and their sort of self-image?
I'm so glad Vivenna got character growth, because I found her absolutely insufferable at first, in a way that it was very much like, I am in this photo and I don't like it. Like, a lot of the things that I really dislike about her... I had a very
similar reaction.
Things that I dislike or have disliked in the past about myself. So, like, I was glad to see her, become a lot cooler.
Yeah.
I liked Siri almost from the get-go, to be honest. It doesn't hurt that, because her name is spelled differently, but I did very much imagine her as, like, Siri from The Witcher, which I think kind of fits, like, a royal but spirited...
mildly feral...
kind of wants to see what is going on and, like, be part of things and understand and, have agency.
I tell you what, I was kind of surprised by how uninvested I ended up being in Siri. Well, because she's, on paper, she's exactly the kind of heroine that I love. She's like the messy one. She's got a lot of characteristics that I admire in other people. Like that kind of openness to explore and to try things and to, the willfulness. I love a willful protagonist. It's one of my favorite things. And I was so surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised exactly that Lightsong ended up being my favorite, but I was surprised that I didn't care about Siri more. Yeah. Whereas, like, Lightsong, I got, like, a paragraph in and I was like, this is my pet gremlin bastard man.
Oh, I love Lightsong.
This is Blorbo from my books.
Yes.
I love him.
I remember when I first, it's another thing, I remember thinking, oh, I love Lightsong. All the first time I read it, and when he gave up, again, spoiler, to save the God King and to heal the God King in order to stop this treasure trove of breaths that the God Kings have had passing down. The God King doesn't have a ton.
Yeah, so to stop the God King from, like, doing magic with all this power that he's got, like, that he's basically a big human box for, they cut out their tongue. And it's awful. Yeah. It's horrible.
It's not a fun time. And so Lightsong's away, like, wait, if I give up my innate breath, I can heal.
Yeah, it's established that gods can heal one person and then immediately die by giving up this massive sort of breath that they've been given.
Yeah, they're like innate. Yeah. And I remember feeling so crestfallen and just sad, and just that whole bit was just shocking. In a way, I was like, what? Wait, what?
I tell you what, that was kind of an interesting one, because that was one where I kind of agreed with Eli in that It's a weird one, because I agreed with Eli in that I felt like that bit of world building was like they kind of banged you over the head with that at the beginning, that Lightsong was like, I don't get why anyone would do this. I like to live, If I was a better person, maybe I wouldn't, but I so it kind of felt like that was the obvious end to his arc. But the thing about that whole 70% chunk in the middle, where, he doesn't go back to any of the things that he established in the first 20, is that I completely forgot about it until it was time for Lightsong to give up his breath. And then I was like, oh, I should have seen that coming.
I didn't see it coming the first time I read it.
Unpopular opinion, I don't like the God King enough to give up Lightsong for it.
Also, I feel I kind of agree. Like, it's kind of a sort of...
was it the right thing to do mechanically in order to, like, save, the other kingdom? Yes, absolutely. Do I think it was a worthwhile trade as a, like, external fiction reader? I'm like,
just get one of the other gods to do it. Why does it have to be Lightsong?
Yeah. Get one of the stupid sports himbos to do it, and let my gay mad uncle, like, stay.
Yeah, get one of them with their stupid fantasy croquet.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of... I think it's one of those things which... Having read so many more books now, basically, yes, because of this podcast.
Oh, hard same. I only now read because of this podcast.
And it's kind of like, I feel that the God King was a very two-dimensional character. Like, he was the Edward Ferris of this book. Call back to Sense and Sensibility, link it in there. He's kind of going, well, he's nice. But
he really doesn't have a personality at all.
Fine.
His personality is Siri's taught him everything he knows.
His personality is like charmingly ignorant.
Yeah. Oh, you know what he is? He's born sexy yesterday. That's the trope.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I'm so innocent, and I will imprint on you, and now we're married. And like that's the trope. Like, but it's a man, so I didn't realise for ages. Yeah.
Equality.
Diversity win. Brandon Sanderson has made a male born sexy yesterday character.
I'll tell you what, again, Nightblood. Can we talk about Nightblood? Because I love Nightblood.
Absolutely.
Nightblood is
I love him.
Utter fave. Just sentient sword, but sentient sword with like sass.
Nightblood constantly like, Vasha, can we kill someone? Vasha, I crave violence.
Also, can I just say, this was like some of the only genuine like good horror writing in this book, were the bits where you didn't work out how the sword was killing people until so you'd get this like really weird, you kind of knew there was something up with the sword, and you'd see Vasha being like, I am doing crime things. And then he would just chuck the sword at a group of people and then leg it.
Yeah.
And then you were like, okay, this is kind of weird. And then he'd come back and everybody would mysteriously be dead, and the sword would just be there like, I didn't do it.
I killed some evil. I did good.
And it was like, I felt like every time that happened, that was handled in a really creepy, good horror movie. And then when you finally hear the sword's voice, he's like a golden retriever of murder. He's like, can we kill?
Father, yes, I crave violence.
I'm a good sword. Kill. And you're just like, oh my god.
Oh, I love the conceit behind the sword, which is just like, it was basically, it's an object that has been imbued, a sentient object that has been given breath to like, it's not a person, but it's kind of a person, and it's like deeply forbidden. Vasha kind of implies that this can be done, and then refuses to tell Vivenna anything more about it. He's like, I will not tell you this, and don't ever ask me again. Anyway, but the thing is that when you imbue it, you have to give it a command, like what you do when you awaken like your cloak to make it protect you or whatever. And the command that they gave it was destroy evil.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was like, because it has to be quite simple, a command. You can't get really complicated with it. But I just love, like, as a software engineer, I love that they, like, this has all kinds of unintended consequences where it's like, well, you have to define evil, define destroy. Like, what happens if this happened? What happens in that scenario? Like,
what is evil?
Exactly. And it's like, Nightblood gets its idea of what evil is from the people that it was, like, raised around, essentially, which is Vasha and, like, his... another person who was around a long time ago, who I think they were sort of married. Anyway, and...
Yeah, they were.
And so Nightblood just kind of like, its entire idea of like evil is based upon these two people's idea of evil, which is, to be fair, actually aligns pretty well with my own idea of what evil is. But it's not that, it's basically like, it's not that simple. It doesn't all just work out the way that they expect. And now they've got this massive liability sword that goes around wanting to kill people because that's what it does.
It's funny, it kind of reminds me of, there was a fanfic series that's ages ago now. I think it's Copper Badge, and it's about the origins of Tony Stark's arm robots. And like, it's an ongoing story, and it's about Dummy, and like Dummy kind of like self-actualizing and being a person, a robot person. But there's a whole thing later where he starts doing things that nobody can understand. And it's because he took as his primary protocol back when like Tony was like drunk and grieving his parents, like protect Tony Stark. That was like or like make sure Tony Stark isn't alone.
Yeah.
But the thing is, nobody programmed him for that. Like that was like, he picked that up accidentally when he like first booted up. And it got embedded so deep in his code that nobody knew why he was doing some of the things he was doing. And they were kind of having okay, I know you're intelligent and you're an AI and everything, but like, you shouldn't be able to do this. What gives?
Yeah.
And it's, the initial command was something that nobody, that had unintended consequences in a way that was really sweet.
I think what I find like so funny is that Vasha is sort of he did so much, he is effectively a scholar, and he's like, I did so much study, and I had a long, hard think about what the command should be for the sentient sword that he made with his wife, Shashara,
yeah.
And the reason that Vasha had to kill her was because she wanted to start making more sentient swords, and Vasha was like, that's a bad idea. Also because she had worked out how to create Lifeless with only a single breath. So whereas the Lifeless are very complicated to make because they need multiple breaths, she'd worked out a command that you only used one.
Lifeless being reanimated corpses. They're basically zombies because the thing that's most shaped like a human is a human.
Yeah, and basically she was gonna sort of let this command be known, and he was like, no, and he ended up having to kill her because she was causing havoc with Nightblood. But my love of Nightblood is just like, I love the sassy sword, and also because Nightblood goes world hopping, and I love it. And okay, spoilers: the first time you meet Nightblood in, I can't remember which book it is now. It's like basically this guy picks up the sword and he's described this sword, and you're like la 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 sword, and then like the final line of the chapter is, "Hello, would you like to kill some evil today?" And I was like, no way, no way, my favourite sword, my favourite sword.
Well, you have a moment like that in this book as well, with the like when the fisherman pulls him out of the ocean, and you're like, I don't know why are we hanging out with this fisherman? I don't get what's going. Oh, the sea's talking to him. That's a bit weird. This is a bit late in the day to be introducing a talking ocean. And then it's like, no, he's just pulled Nightblood out of the...
So one thing about, it's not directly about Nightblood, but basically, so Vasha has this incredibly powerful, but like incredibly like sort of dangerous to use sword. And then there's also these two mercenaries, and one of whom is it like there's a whole thing where they're like, haha, we're mercenaries, isn't that funny? And then it turns out that they were like actually secretly also evil all along. Spoilers. And anyway, there's this running thing where Denth, one of the two, hates Vasha because Vasha killed one of their friends, and he's like, I can't understand how Vasha did it because this friend of ours was a way better duelist.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, he must have used that demon sword of his, kind of thing. And Vasha's like, no, I didn't. I did actually just beat him in a duel, essentially. And at the end, and this is massive spoilers, Denth and Vasha are fighting. And Denth, it has been established as an even better dueler than the dead friend was. So there's no way that Vasha should be able to take him. And what happens is Vasha gets an opening, or like Vasha's like about to get killed. And what he does is he grabs Denth and he gives him a bunch of breaths. Like he transfers breaths to him. And it's been established that the first time that happens, that you have more than one breath in your body, it's like this incredible, like, sensory sort of moment.
Semi-orgasmic experience.
You know, every colour is brighter, you can hear clearer, everything is more alive and more sort of sensual. Anyway, and so Denth is just like having a blue screen moment, and that's when Vasha runs him through. And like that is a finishing move. It really, I loved that because it was such a like, it's, you've got this magic system, it's well established all the things that you can do with it and so on and so forth. But he's not doing any of that. He's relying on a much more kind of primal aspect of it.
Yeah.
In a very pragmatic way. And I really loved that. And I didn't see it coming. And it was such a good moment.
Yeah, I enjoyed the kind of, the fact that like we kind of, one of the things that I think upsets Vivenna quite a lot, and it's something we kind of see, the kind of the tension of having more than one breath and what that involves and things. And then but what you do see is that like people are so unwilling to give it up. When they have loads, sometimes they'd rather die than, and that I think was very like well baked in. And it tells you so much about who Vasha is as a person. Yeah. That he's able to just take the risk that he'd never get it back. To do that. You know, the fact that he knows he can live without it. And he's not blasé about it per se, but the fact that that's what he does is so shocking in the context of that world that we've spent so long in. That you feel, I don't know, I just thought it was a really interesting, like, peak Vasha moment to see that. It was kind of the cherry on the top of the Vasha that we got to know as he was getting to know Vivenna. Yeah. And as we kind of started to see him as, like, maybe the person that she should be hanging out with and the person that maybe was trying to do the right thing the whole time. But even though he's, like, bad at talking to people, he was very relatable. I enjoyed the, like... Yeah. I can't counter Denth because I'm not a smooth talker. I was like, I appreciate this about you.
I tell you what, like, it was kind of, I won't say where, but when Vasha turns up elsewhere, world hopping, it's the same vibes you get for, like, the guy is just, it's so, I would love for you guys to read Stormlight Archive because it does lift, I think, a lot of the stuff that was good in this book and does it better because it's got more time.
Speaking of time, I think that Larimar should get to say of all the people in
Susabrun, God King. Let the man say
Ooh, interesting.
He hasn't been able to say anything ever.
Nightblood, my fave. My fave little sword. Or just go like, I want evil.
Oh, Nightblood absolutely always says f***, we just don't get to see it, I'm sure.
I feel like this is actually a good book for that, you know, like, is allowed to say f*** but doesn't. You know that meme? That means like can say f*** but doesn't. Is legally not allowed to say f***.
Oh, Vivenna. Vivenna becomes allowed to say f*** but still doesn't.
I'm not saying that she might when she crops up elsewhere. Just saying. But I love her, and I love her when she crops up elsewhere.
Is there anyone in particular that we'd want to fight?
Vivenna and Siri's dad.
Yeah.
Oh,
He
yes.
is a dick.
Yeah.
Yes. His kids should unionize against him. That was the whole take I got from any time he was in a room. I was like,
I want to fight Tonk Far because he kills animals. Like, I would lose.
Oh
That's
yeah,
valid.
also
Worth it.
he is. I mean, I don't want to fight him. I want to kill Tonkfar. I'd fight the dad to be like,
you'd fight the dad to beat some sense into him. Tonk Far just needs to die.
Yeah, just like get Nightblood and kill Tonkfar. Yeah, I think that's fair.
That's valid.
There's this like running gag where he keeps adopting animals and then keeps like losing them, and it's like, oh, that comes back. You get to see all the animals that he's like vivisected.
Yeah,
it's grim.
Yeah, it's well done. But I was like, when I remember, first time reading, I was like,
It's dark as
Yeah.
Such an awful moment because you do actually kind of trust these characters, even though they themselves have repeatedly told both Vivenna and you as the reader that you shouldn't.
Yeah. I do love this book. It has a special place in my heart and my soul. What do we think? Our darling Gothmog. There are no cats in this book.
I feel like Lightsong is the character that is closest to a cat.
She did sit on the book while I was reading it.
That's a seal of approval. That is a seal of approval.
I was telling the guys earlier, my dog tried to take the book out of my hands because I was not petting the dog. So I don't know if that's a sign.
Yeah. Cats yes, dogs no is what I'm getting from this. Wookie didn't seem to give a shit, but I was reading it on my phone, so like she didn't have that much of an opportunity to.
You were hiding the fact that you were reading a book from her, and if she had known that you were reading a book, she might have tried to stop you.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, she doesn't mind. She doesn't mind you paying attention to things that aren't her. Like, she's perfectly happy to be like, I'm just going to lean my full, extremely, like, heavy for the tiny dog that I am weight on you while you do things.
Bless.
And she doesn't really need to be petted as part of that process.
Meanwhile, I am currently, I'm like, as we speak, working on a knitting project that has like 3 separate balls of yarn in it because I'm doing colours. And the cat, oh my god, she wants to eat and destroy so very badly. I think she would like this book. I think there's definitely crime. There's violence, there's backstabbing, there's plot twists.
I think she's like Nightblood. I'd like to think...
Yeah. And I think the aesthetics as well, like, it's just like, she is very beautiful, and things being very beautiful is very much a plot point
Yes.
in this. And are the gods not cats, really, when you get right down to it? It's like, we're here to be pretty and adored.
Yeah, they are cats.
Yeah.
So, I think, what do we think? Out of 10?
Like a 7 or an 8?
I think a 7 or an 8. I
would go 7 just for the lack of actual cats. Like, that is a really, like, important point we've got to take into consideration.
Also, like, most of the backstabbing is non-literal. It's, like, metaphysical betrayal. Very few people actually get stabbed.
Yeah, like someone got stabbed in the thigh because he thinks he knows how to fight and he doesn't.
Oh, that was so funny.
I think a 7. I think a solid 7.
My darling useless man.
Yeah, 7.
That's a good
Yeah.
What else are we reading? What else have you been guys consuming, literature and or otherwise wise? I enjoyed our discussion on Sticky Toffee Pudding last time, so I don't know if our listeners did. If you did, tell us.
I've got something topical, which is that so there is a publisher that has a book sale in our city every now and then. Of like sort of damaged books or books that they haven't been able to get rid of, and every year my spouse and I go and we buy an absurd amount of books, and yesterday we came home with 27 books, and between us I should add,
I didn't realise it was that many. My god.
Yeah, it was so many, and one of them is something I'm really excited to read. I've got it started on already, and it's called There Is No Planet B by Mike Berners-Lee. And it's so the tagline is a handbook for the make or break years, and it's about climate change. And really, the thing that's really interesting to me about this one is it was updated, like I think late last year. So it's got this little preface to the updated version where he's saying, like, I'm writing this from lockdown, and here's what's changed in the last 2 years, because it was published for the first time in 2019, so it was still really recent.
Okay.
And so I'm like, I can read this without worrying that it's out of date, I guess, because things are still changing so fast.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited to read that because it looks like it's going to be sort of practical without being pessimistic, which is definitely something I need when I think about the climate emergency. But I'm really excited to read that. I think that's going to be good.
Whereas I'm at the complete other end of the spectrum, and I read the most recent book in the Rivers of London trilogy in like one sitting yesterday, and it was very funny, good. And I enjoyed it immensely, as I always do. I was like, I'd completely forgotten, because I think I read most of the rest of the series in like about a couple of months, and then I got this, and I just left it on the shelf for ages. And I don't know why. And then I picked it up, and I was a page in, and I was like, oh, these are fun. I remember this. These are fun, actually.
Yeah.
And just devoured it, and it was amazing. I'm also very much looking forward to the new one. Is coming out in April, and we got a title quite recently, and it's Amongst Our Weapons.
That sounds quite cool.
And the summary blurb talks about, people that no one will ever expect. And I'm just like, is this whole book going to be a nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition gag? Because I am so here for it.
I love it. I've started listening to God's Gods, because as we started some Discworld on the podcast, it's like my sort of comfort listen. When you like have this is just, an insight into my life. When you like have a stressful week and you just want to have a bath, and you I just want to listen to a book, and my brain does not have to focus, I really recommend Pratchett. It is so good for just chilling. You can laugh. It's just, the best.
I tell you what, they're really good in that they work on so many levels, right? Because you can just read it,
does support,
and just be like
philosophizing if you want to, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
And it's just as good.
You can just be like, this is a very funny crime book.
Yeah.
You don't have to be like, oh man, I want to talk about the nature of reality a second.
Yeah, I definitely don't, but I'm just like, I just want to listen to something funny.
That one is very funny. I do like God's Gods.
I have just noticed the time, guys. I think we're going to have to wrap up.
We might have to wrap up.
I'm very sad.
I'm really excited for next time, though.
Yeah, next time, Out of the Silent Planet, C.S. Lewis.
Which I have read before. It's garbage and I love it.
I got stuck. I have tried to read it before, and I got stuck about the space colonialism level.
Yeah, it is pretty heavy on that, yeah.
I sent Emma for a screenshot, actually, because I was like, I'll listen to it on my Audible, and the only one it had was the Spanish translation. I was like, well, I'm going to have to read this, so I'm going to have to brush up on my Spanish. I am not fluent in Spanish, so reading it is.
It is pretty short.
I am, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a fun time. It's going to be a good chat.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening. Remember to follow us on your podcast platform so you never miss an episode, and give us a like or review if you enjoyed this episode. You can connect with us on all our socials. They're all listed in the description box below. I don't know why I'm pointing down when I say that, because nobody can see me. But anyway. Or you can email us at teachingmycattoread@gmail.com. There's also a link to our Ko-fi, coffee, I don't know how to pronounce it,
I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it.
Which is basically like our sort of virtual donation box.
A tip jar.
And it basically just goes towards the podcast hosting platform fee, effectively. But yeah, that's all linked below. Say hello, send us a message, and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we will see you next time.
Hey, Editor Rowan here. While Lottie said that our next episode would be C.S. Lewis's Out of the Silent Planet, that will be in 2 episodes' time. Episode 10 is going to be a special episode called What Makes a Good Adaptation. So that's what will be dropping in 2 weeks. See you then.